Thanks for joining our 14.1 release post stand up. The first item is actually was a carryover for new year. You just had it in there.
Yeah, sorry. I thought I pushed send on my Slack message to you, Sam, and I haven't. Um, I sorted the orders so that we would talk about the things that were quicker first, so that maybe people who didn't want to stick around for the other parts between for the overall improvement of deprecations and removals don't have to stick around.
Okay.
Do you want me to ping William?
It's okay. We're recording and he can always watch asynchronously.
Okay. Okay, sounds good. So it looks like someone's typing in there. I was just curious as to, for agenda item number 1, what our plan was for coverage since the 16th is FNF. So Taylor, you're out all weekend. I see that. Thank you for helping us review release post items this week. I'm available. I'm happy to support Sam, William, and however y'all need. You'll just have to tell me what dates to be available to you.
I was planning on taking the 16th off. I don't think anything's due that day, so I don't know if there's anything that I need to be online for. I know we have action items on the 17th and 18th. Well, mostly on the 18th. So we've got plans on the 18th to make sure that content assembly happens, but is there anything we need to do on the 16th?
I wouldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head outside what's in the MR task list. So your assessment is probably valid. I think that William though might have marketing stuff. I don't know. So I think mostly what I'm trying to do with this agenda item is make sure that Sam and William and Marcel have a conversation and transparently put the plan into our Slack channel by tomorrow or Thursday so that y'all are on the same page and I can support you however you need. William, we're on agenda item number 1. We're trying to figure out how we need to coordinate any.
I think our plan, we talked about like the plan for the 18th, we talked about that, and that was that we talked about last time. So I was going to do content assembly on the morning of the 18th and then hand it over to William for review and then over to Marcel for final review. So that was our plan on the 18th. I don't know if there's another plan other than that that you're looking for, if there's something missing.
No, I think I just want to make sure I'm available and online any days that you need me. I'm imagining that at least Sam, you might be checking on some stuff on the 17th, as will William for the marketing intro. But as far as a concerted effort from everyone on the same day, you're right. That's probably all going to be on the 18th because you're right. Like things are going to get merged. Hopefully, sooner rather than later in the cycle since the 16th is FNF day.
Right.
So I think,
yeah, I mean, I can check in on the 17th. Again, I don't know that there's a lot for me to do. It seems like all of our to-do action items are all on the 18th.
I will follow your lead and I will be available if you ping me and need anything.
Okay. Sounds good.
I guess then agenda item number 2, it sounds like we're good. William, I just wanted to do a quick alignment on the marketing intro. It sounds like you and I got a little out of sync, which is okay. I think we discussed the bigger plan separately and just focus on what we're doing for this 14.1 cycle for this team.
Yes. So this is what I can commit to. I will be responsible for a separate blog post that is fully decoupled from the release post process. I'll get that blog live. The release post intro then for 14.1, we will shorten and simplify. And I will sync with a Noop to verify both of those points.
Mhm.
And if a Noop is not on board with it, I'll write a full marketing intro.
Okay, that's very gracious of you and very reasonable, and it addresses all my concerns. Because, and then are you thinking that this shortened intro that you write that links out to a marketing owned and driven blog?
Nope.
Oh.
Completely decoupled. No marketing, like.
Awesome, we're finally on the same page.
Yeah.
So what
Like,
you're saying is, hey,
no dependencies, no complexity.
beautiful. So you're going to be like, hey, Anoop, this is what Farnoosh and I have been talking about forever. We want the intro to the release post to become a standard intro so that they really shift to being just release notes that are going to be really easy. They're going to basically be auto-published like any other as part of the template.
Yep.
With some plugins from the release post manager that does not rely on anything. No decision making, hopefully, no trying to decide what to highlight, none of that.
That's a good call. There will need to be some level of prioritization. Like the intro shouldn't just be like, here's a bulleted list of everything that's underneath the intro. So in the intro, we'll highlight, I mean, there's some elements that will continue to move forward, like, what are you going to title the post? Like, we're not going to change that format up. We're not going to, like, we still need to say, like, GitLab 14.1 released with X, Y, and Z. And we'll have a short intro that has, like, here's some highlights. Maybe as we make it really simple, like, we already have in the template, like, primary and secondary features. So probably what I'm leaning towards is we have, like, here's the primary features, here's the secondary features, go read the rest.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Like, we try to make it as simple as possible.
I'm available after 3:30 p.m. Mountain, and I think we should have a one-on-one and get really on the same page before you run with it so that there's no misunderstandings. Because I have some expectations around, is it going to become questions around, is it going to be part of the blog template? And can it just be like Mad Libs, plug and play, almost for the release post manager? If not, do we still need to have a marketing lead involved in the release post moving forward? So I love where you're going with this. You're awesome. Are you able to chat one-on-one with me so we get super on the same page after 3 p.m. Mountain Time today?
Maybe. Let me check the schedule. I think I can make that happen. Let me say one delta then from, I think last week we said, I'll work on a template and then Sam will populate that template. Let me rescind that for the sake of simplicity and say, I will be responsible for the marketing intro.
For
like,
this cycle.
I'm the DRI for the marketing intro. I'm going to put what I want in there. It's not going to look like the normal intro.
Yes, I'm totally on board. And then you and I separately get on the same page so that whatever we do, we can carry forward and templatize. But it's not, Sam and crew don't have to worry about it other than.
That's right. It's not extra work on Sam. I will pop the intro file in there. I'll be the DRI for that. And
beautiful.
Then my other commitment is that I will make the best effort to structure my intro for this post in a format that can be templated. But there's no need to do extra work or anything to complicate this release.
Okay, awesome. So you and I will pick it up separately and then we'll figure out we'll see what the outcome is and what we end up being able to standardize or not. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my apologies for there's a lot of fast moving parts. So
listen, I'm the one who rescinded it like 3 days later because I was confused. It's all good. We're just trying to make improvements here. And we're moving in the right direction. All done. Over to you, Sam.
Okay, so our next two are technical in nature. The first one is a bug in the release post generator. I think Farnoosh.
No, careful. Asserted bug.
Asserted.
I'm asking if this is the intended behavior.
So that we have an open question about the desired behavior for the release post generator. Farnoosh, I think we need you to help clarify
Let
this.
me take a look, see.
You probably could handle this one async, but we can
Okay.
live if you want.
I'm happy to, if it makes it, I know because we have a lot to cover today and it's 11:13. If you think this is one we can cover async, I'm happy to do that, but let's see if it's a quick answer. So sure, there's a little. I don't, I don't think this is going to be a quick answer because I don't know. I need a minute to look at it. So let's do this right and let's do it async.
Okay.
And thank you for flagging it, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. So that one's on hold. That one's pending guidance from you, Farnoosh. I believe I put in my thoughts on the desired behavior, but I think you would be the DRI to
You're absolutely right. I will look at that today at some point so that we can move forward. Thank you.
And then the next one, the link's not scrolling in Chrome. It looks like both Thomas and Taylor were unable to replicate it. So if we can't duplicate the bug, I mean, there's not a lot that can be done. I would suggest just closing that out, Farnoosh, but
Yeah, I agree with you, Sam, and thank you for being diligent. I DM'd with Michael Press about that. Apparently they have something for it in their backlog, but if we can't replicate it, then we can't help them. And I say we note that in the retro, tag him and check it off. I'm with you.
close it out. Okay, great. So that takes us to our last point, which is we're looking to make a decision about how to handle deprecations going forward, really deprecations and removals, I suppose, but mostly deprecations for the first iteration. We have a few different options on the table. We can do nothing and we can just wait for the release feature to take over and adjust the process from there. We have the proposal that I originally put forward, which was to automatically copy deprecations forward into future release posts until things were removed. And I ended up closing that MR in favor of Orit's proposal, which personally I liked more, which was just to move deprecations out to the documentation and get them out of the release post anyway. If it is more of release notes, it actually seems to me like deprecations fall more in documentation rather than like release notes, and we can just link over to our deprecation page in our documentation to view those. We've got a few different proposals on the table. We're really, we've debated some of the pros and cons in that merge request. And again, I think at this point, we're just waiting for a decision how we want to move forward.
Yeah, totally. Everyone's awesome for rallying around this. I see that Darren's here. Mark can't join us because he's on a call. He's looking at the release post. Mark Wood is looking at the release post item generate, but he cannot join us because he's on a call with a customer. So the first thing I want to mention, just to make sure I'm not confused, is whatever we do, we're not in a time crunch to figure it out for 14.1, right? Like, we're just going to handle deprecations, announcements, as we always have. It is currently documented in the release post process, right, Sam? So there's nothing that's like hanging in the balance for this, right?
Yeah, we have not made any changes as of yet. We could make changes for 14.1, but we have not made any changes as of right now. Now 14.1 arguably is one of the best times to do it because we're starting a new release cycle. So as of right now, we don't have any deprecations. So just, technically speaking, it's going to be a whole lot easier to move things over now versus the longer we wait into 14.x, the more deprecations we're going to have. And that's just going to make things a little bit more messy when, we've got the old way of doing things, the new way of doing things, and then you've got to figure out how to transition forward. So there's not no time urgency, but there's not a huge amount of time urgency either. We have some flexibility there. if we are planning to move to the release feature somewhat soon, then maybe we just don't worry about this. But at the same time, I guess I don't know what the plans are for the release feature. Do we even want to mention deprecations in the release feature itself, or are those better suited for the documentation? Maybe this is a preliminary move that prepares us to go to the release feature.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I'm in agreement with everything you say. I think we do the work right now. I think this is a good time to do the work and update the documentation so that it's in place to start getting leverage potentially for 14.2 onward, right? But even if it pushed to 14.3, I don't think it would be like the end of the world, but I'm with you, the sooner the better. And I don't even know like if we have a lot of deprecations announcements for 14.1, if any. So I hear you. So I think what, in terms of the release feature, the challenge is that there is no clear timeline. It's not in anyone's dedicated backlog. And even though I'm going to hire the first senior PM, technical PM for product operations, they're going to have technical skills, but they're not going to be able to single-handedly upgrade and change product to move things into the release feature. So I think that's the long-term vision. Which is why we want to quell and align to that, like whatever work and automation we do in the current process in the meanwhile. But unfortunately, I can't say, hey, let's put the kibosh on fixing this at all, because we're going to start working to put everything into the release feature in Q4. I wish I could say that, or even Q1, but I don't have that answer. So that being said, I feel like, and I was looking at some of the notes, I feel like the answer is probably somewhere in between, but before I can give my opinion, I'd like to ask y'all some questions. In your opinion, if we go the route of kind of saying, hey, we're going to push this into documentation and we're going to link to that documentation, we'll still have like a deprecations and removals section, right, in the release post, aka release notes. But instead of like these bullet points that go to these issues or epics, right, it's just going to go straight to the documentation. Do you all think that, one, the relevance and the importance of highlighting them will be lost? And then two, do you think that it'll be harder to manage to make sure that PMs and EMs are actually keeping the content and the documentation up to date, so that the dates aren't wrong or something's shifted in the nature of what's happening's changed? How do we ensure that the content is up to date and the date's accurate and all that jazz if we're just pushing it into a documentation link?
Yeah, so at least in my personal opinion, and just speaking only for myself here, I feel like documentation is a much more natural place for deprecations to show up. It's there locally for anyone who's running self-managed. They have a local copy of the documentation. And so they're able to see for their version, they can pull up the documentation page and see which features are deprecated. So the relevance and importance of highlighting them, I mean, we're already linking out, and then it's also included in the documentation. I think it's only going to be, if anything, more visible, not less, because you're getting eyes on it for people coming from the release post headed over there, and then you're also getting eyes on it for people who just navigate there directly, through the documentation. So now you've added a path of discovery potentially for people to find it, rather than removed one. As far as keeping it up to date, there is a downside that, there's not this requirement for people to re-add it. But I would argue that the previous method had its own flaws because it was hard to remember to re-add it, right? So in a way, we had inaccurate information in the deprecation section just because PMs, myself included, I know I forgot one release and I had to go add it in later. But people wouldn't add it in or need to copy it forward, and it's really hard to maintain all of that consistency. All of our documentation is kept up to date because documentation is part of all of our feature work. So, I don't know if there's a way to remind them. I think that would be great. We may be able to code something like that up, but I don't know. That's my perspective on it anyway.
I hear you. I think yeah, I think like the way when I'm actually looking at like how we do deprecations and removals right now, and there is like a little summary that goes with it. And I don't know, I don't know if yeah, I mean, if we can maybe just have a title if we could ensure that there was a title for the deprecation and removal that was consistent and clear, and then that title simply linked to where it needed to link to in documentation, I think that could make a lot of sense. And I think we would then replicate that and save ourselves a lot of real estate in the actual release feature as well in product, right? And it would all make a lot of sense. Um, the bit about how to ensure that it's getting updated and reviewed, that's that I'm not as confident in terms of repeating them. There still has to be a mechanism to know to repeat them wherever we're surfacing them, whether it's the release post page or whether it's the release feature interface. No.
Why would it need to be repeated?
So we're saying we wouldn't highlight each individual one.
Right, we would just include a link over to the deprecation page in the documentation.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I think that's a very reasonable. In some ways, it feels really simple and good, and it makes life easier.
I mean, I think it's the simplest solution. And wouldn't we rather fail safe? I mean, I would rather forget to update or remove a deprecation from the documentation than to forget to add it to the release post. Because if it's there and shouldn't be, we can always say, "Oh no, it's not being deprecated," and people get something back. So they're going to be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Whereas if we forget to put it in the release post and then all of a sudden it disappears without warning, that's going to cause much more consternation.
Yeah, yeah. And this would essentially render, this would render needing to, would this render needing to update? It would render needing to update the release post item generator to, generate the MRs. It wouldn't render unnecessary the work, Darren, you've been doing. We still need to understand, we'd have to modify some of it, obviously, in terms of what they have to do or don't have to do anymore for the release post, but understanding of deprecations and removals versus breaking changes, it's in the product handbook, that's all great, and the documentation is all great. We would just have to do a sweep through of like, okay, then what are we asking? We could still ask PMs to do something as part of the release post, right? That serves as the reminder that Sam was talking about.
Yeah, certainly. You can certainly ask them to check to make sure that, again, I've been following Orit's MR a little bit. So assuming that the documentation MR, the content on the documentation page is somewhat automated, I don't know that's the plan, i.e. it's grabbing the issue content to create the page, or just we opening up an MR against the documentation page, not sure. But we can certainly add a reminder for the PMs, hey, if it's a deprecation issue that's feeding that content, or B, you've added that content manually, you have the responsibility of checking in every release to make sure it's consistent or updated.
Because we would still have our deprecation issue, right? I like that we're doing that. We're saying, hey, when an EM or a PM, and usually it's the PM, creates a deprecation issue, here's what's up. This is your process. This is your template. And in that very template, there could be some information, whatever, we can figure it out, Darren, in terms of how to processize the support for having in a documentation. I am leaning more towards that because I feel like not only does it, I think, Sam, to your point, put the content where it belongs more naturally, it abbreviates how much content we're curating and putting on the release post page, which also helps us gear up for having real release notes, whether it's a mock set of release notes because we're taking out the marketing intro and abbreviating and having it on the web page, and then eventually pushing that same thing into our release feature and having an automated interface pulling it. Like, I think it's moving in the right direction. I would love to hear, not to put you on the spot, Thomas, your point of view, because you're the only non-PM on this call. So if you're around and you want to give your 2.5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cents, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. 'Thank you for letting me know the inflation rate.
Who's the audience for the release notes or release post?
So it's our users, right? Ultimately, first and foremost. And then we've got some internal users, but I always go back to our customers and users, because even our internal folks like TAMs, they're just trying to serve the customer, right?
Users, unfortunately, is too broad to give you firm feedback. If the question is who is maintaining a GitLab instance or integration is more technical in nature, then if that's the audience of a release post, then having deprecations is useful, or at least having them consolidated is useful. If the audience is more corporate, then documentation is the intended audience of the documentation. Serves the audience of the more technical folks, then I'd argue the deprecations belong over there. So it's really an audience question first, from my point of view.
What do you mean by more corporate?
Business development, corporate stakeholders, the person who owns the budget.
No, those people are not GitLab users by and large. They might have a login. They might look at an issue. We're talking about engineers. When we say users, these are engineers, designers, probably product managers, folks that are using the product. Often budget holders are not the end users, but certainly also administrators who install.
Then what you're saying is at odds with what we have documenting as far as licensing tiers, where Ultimate is geared towards executives as far as feature set is concerned.
I don't believe that's in conflict, but I'm happy to discuss that another time.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm arguing audience, and that is outside my lines. What I am suggesting, though, is that this is an audience question first, rather than anything else. To me, I'm not going to go look at release. I will look at release notes. I'll look at change log, not release post, release notes. And I will look at documentation as far as what is the current supported thing, rather than looking at what is being announced with the given release. So I'm looking at change log. I'm looking at technical documentation, but that's my bias as an engineering manager. That's why I was asking audience.
Okay, yeah, that's totally fair, and that's totally helpful. I think if ultimately what we're doing is not removing, if right now the release post is really kind of our outward facing release notes, that's really where we're initially generating them. We're not suggesting that we're going to remove the deprecations or removals or upgrade sections. We're suggesting that we're going to just point them elsewhere, and the content will all be elsewhere. The two things that I think are on my mind hearing this feedback as well is we want, one thing that's nice about the way we capture them currently on the release post page is that there's links to issues and there's content that's user friendly that like TAMs can understand too, right? If they need to understand what's happening when they look at this, to be able to work with their customers as needed. So one thing we have to be careful about is not having it become too technical or not clear enough for all of our users. Actually, to Thomas's point, this made me think about it, that we're serving with release post. The other thing is if we're going to modify it, there's a template modification that needs to happen, right? So if we say we are going to go this path, we also actually need to change the main release post template. So, right, because it's pulling these things from MRs right now.
And that's part of that MR.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So
it does actually do that modification. Yeah.
Right. I don't like this team. Like we've got the fantastic Thomas. This is his last cycle. He can only have so much time, and assuming he's, has even the time, like, is he the right candidate? I don't know. So these things all have to be taken into consideration, that we don't actually have a dedicated engineer on this team.
Yeah. So I'm saying that those code changes are already done. Those are part of that merge request proposal.
Oh, I thought you were saying they need to get done.
Nope.
Sorry about that. My bad.
You provided some feedback.
Yeah.
Like how we have a hard coded version in there. So there's a few things that might need to be adjusted, but the code changes are in there.
Yeah. So I think we're all leaning in the same direction in terms of wanting to abbreviate it and push it into docs. I think I'm okay with that. I'm not hearing any huge concerns. I hear Thomas's point. I think we have to make sure we are cognizant of certain things so that we don't go that route and like not serve some of our audience. But I know we're at time, and Sam, maybe you and I can just connect one-on-one as needed and just keep moving forward on this. I appreciate this conversation because it helps me understand a lot more though. And I appreciate Darren and Mark to take the time to join so that we're all on the same page.
Absolutely, happy to do it.
Yeah, sounds
Yeah,
good.
so if anyone's like anti going this route, let us know. Okay.
Reiterate.
Yeah, I think we can make it work. Yay. Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for the discussion. Thanks for staying 4 minutes over. Furnish, I'm happy to connect with you more on this separately as well.
Yeah, we just want to make sure all the moving parts come together nicely and it's smooth, and I think then we can rock and roll.
Sounds good.
Thanks everyone. Thanks everyone. Bye.